So we just finished talking about the 5th Mishnah in the 10th chapter, and we were talking about Hallel. We're going to say Hallel while we're eating the Korban Pesach. We're actually going to sing, the priests are going to sing Hallel, by the way, while they're slaughtering the Korban Pesach. Hallel is an absolutely critical part of everything to do with Seder night. It's the original time when we sang Hallel. And so the Mishnah, but of course we don't want the kids just to go to sleep. We need to feed the kids. We need to sing Hallel, but we need to feed the kids too. So the Mishnah is going to ask, and we're picking up in the 6th Mishnah of the 10th chapter, At Heichan Hu Omer, how much Hallel do we sing? Because if we sing the whole Hallel, well, Beit Shammai certainly are going to say, if we sing the whole Hallel, the kids are going to lose interest. Beit Shammai omrim ad em habanim smecha. Moshivi akeret habayit em habanim smecha. That's the end of the first psalm, the first Tehillah. So Beit Shammai say, look, we don't want the kids to drift off. We're going to stop saying Hallel at the end of the first Tehillah. And then we can say the rest after the meal. Beit Shammai run really, really short and strict. And Beit Hillel say, Uveit Hillel omrim, ad chalamish l'mayim u'mayim, vechotem bigula. We're going to say Hallel until flint into a fountain of waters. That's the end of the second Tehillah. But Seit Israel mimitzrayim, when Israel went out of Egypt. Beit Hillel saying, hey guys, sure we need to stop saying Hallel for the sake of the kids, but we can't stop until we've said something about leaving Egypt. And leaving Egypt is the second Tehillah in Hallel, B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim. And Vechotem Bigula, and we conclude the blessing with redemption. Rabbi Tarfon's going to try and explain what that is, but I might just mention, by the way, that we've already covered in the Mishnah the story of Rabban Gamliel, who used to say, look, there are 3 things you've got to mention. And if we just shoot up a little bit above that, we covered in the Mishnah the fact that we're going to drush from my father was a wandering Aramean. And we've covered the fact that the children are going to, or the son is going to ask. And I can't help pointing out that the word Haggadah means telling. Haggadah means telling. It's not a history book. If we want to look at the history of the leaving Egypt, we can just look in the book of Shemot for that. The Haggadah is not a history book. It's a telling book. It's a book about how people told the story. And Rabban Gamliel's got his way of telling the story. There are 3 things you've got to do. And the drush on Arami Oved Avi, on a wandering Aramean was my father. That's another way of telling the story. But I can't help pointing out that this Tehillah, that Beit Hillel demand that we say before the meal, that's another way of telling the story. But Seit Yisrael Mitzrayim, that's how, let's say, King David wrote the book of Psalms. That's how King David told the story. The word Haggadah means telling. And if we look at the Haggadah, look at today's Haggadah, you'll see that it is a collection of tellings. It's a collection of how different people have told a story, whether it's the 5 rabbis sitting up all night or whatever. You'll see the Haggadah is a collection of tellings of how the story has been told at different times. And one of the ways it's told is this Tehillah, B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim. And then Beit Hillel says, "V'chotem bigula." We need to the chatima. The chotem literally means to seal, and the sealing of a bracha is the bit at the end where we say Baruch atah Hashem, whatever it is. In this case, Ga'al Yisrael. Baruch atah Hashem, Ga'al Yisrael. That's the chatima, the sealing of the blessing. So what's this going to be? What's the chatima going to be for this blessing? Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Asher Ga'alanu v'Ga'ala v'Teinu Mitzrayim. Rabbi Tarfon says, who redeemed us and redeemed our fathers from Egypt. V'lo haya chotem. He doesn't use the final expression, Baruch atah Hashem. And Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Rabbi Akiva Omer, and of course, Rabbi Akiva is into redemption in a big way, right? Rabbi Akiva is going to be one of the leaders of the revolt against the Romans, and he is going to be killed for that leadership. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Kain Hashem Eloheinu ve'Eloteinu Yegienu lemoadim ve'leregalim acharim habayim lichratenu l'shalom. So may the Lord our God and God of our fathers bring us to other appointed times and festivals which come towards us for peace, rejoicing in the rebuilding of your city and glad in your service, and there will eat of the sacrifices and the Pesahim. Ad Baruch Atah Hashem Ga'al Yisrael, until blessed are you who has redeemed Israel. And of course, if you look at today's Haggadah, you'll see, by the way, we try to make compromises, and actually we bring in the language of both of these rabbis. So we begin with the language of Rabbi Tarfon, who, by the way, did see the temple. Rabbi Tarfon was a priest, and in his youth, the temple still stood. So he has a recollection. But we start with the language of Rabbi Tarfon, and then we go on to that language of Rabbi Akiva. And if you look at the Haggadah next time you look at it, you'll recognize, you'll see that there. And then we're going to eat the meal. We're going to eat the meal. And interesting that the Mishnah doesn't have much to say about the meal, actually. Maybe it assumes we know how to eat the meal. And it goes straight on to say, Mazgulo koshli shim avarech al muzono. They pour him a third cup, and he makes the bracha over the meal. So we're not actually saying anything about the meal. And the ritual about the one matzah, the two matzahs, the maror, it takes a lot of space in the rubric in the Haggadah, but it's not mentioned in the Mishnah at all. The Mishnah goes straight onto the third cup. And I guess we began by observing that this chapter of Mishnah is structured around wine. And actually, we began, of course, the whole Masechet with wine. And we really are the way that the Mishnah looks at the Seder is really focused on wine. It's focused on the cups. So Mazgulo koshlishi, they pour him the third cup. Varech al muzoro, he blesses over his meal. Revi'i gomer alav et hahalel. So a fourth cup. Revi'i is going to be the fourth cup. Revi'i gomer alav et halel ve'omer alav birkat hashir. A fourth, he concludes the Hallel with it and recites over it the blessing of the song. Bein hakasot halalu im rotze lishtot yishte bein shlishi lerevi'i lo yishte. Between these cups, this must be between the second and the third cup. Or if he wants to drink, he can drink. But between the third and the fourth, we don't drink. We don't drink, if you like, during the Hallel. And there's an idea in the commentators that we don't want to get drunk. We don't want to get too drunk at this point in the Seder because we need to finish the Hallel. We don't want to go off to sleep. But there has to be a question now. What is the blessing of the song? That Mishnah. Revi'i gomer alav et Hallel ve'omer alav birkat hashir. The fourth, we conclude the Hallel with it and we recite over it the blessing of the song. So what is that blessing? What's the blessing of the song? Let's have a look in the Gemara to explain the blessing of the song. We're going to fast forward in the Gemara. Actually, I'm bringing you here, by the way, the Munich manuscript. Because as we look at the Munich manuscript, our printed edition, which is the Vilna edition, has really been changed to follow Rashi. But the text in the Munich manuscript is clearly the one that the Rambam has, and the Rif has, and the Rosh has. All the ancient witnesses have the same text as we see in the Munich manuscript. So that's the one which I'm bringing you today. Just for this class, and it's a very interesting text, actually, worth printing out and bringing to the Seder. Let's begin. The Gemara is going to begin just by re-quoting our Mishnah. Revi'i gomer alav et Hallel ve'omer alav birkat hashir. A fourth, he concludes the Hallel with it and he recites over it the blessing of the song. And the Gemara asks, "My birkat hashir, what is this blessing of the song?" Rav Yehuda Amar Yehalucha Hashem Eloheinu. So Rav Yehuda said, Yahlucha Hashem Eloheinu, they shall praise you, Lord our God. That's the bracha that we always say after Hallel. And you can see it printed in the Siddur after Hallel, and it's printed in the Haggadah too. That's the classic bracha after Hallel. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Nishmat Kol Chai. Rabbi Yochanan says, Nishmat Kol Chai. That's the poem at the end of Pusukei de Zimra on Shacharit and festivals. On Shacharit and festivals, we say the Tehillim before, at the beginning of Shacharit, and then we conclude with Nishmat Kol Chai Tvarech et Shimcha Hashem Eloheinu. That's Birkat Hashir for Rabbi Yochanan. And of course, if you go and look at a Haggadah, you'll see again that we are trying to make peace with everybody. So if you go and look at a Haggadah, later this evening, you'll see that we do say Nishmat and we say Yehalucha. So we say them both. We say Nishmat first and Yehalucha afterwards, because Yehalucha is actually the bracha which concludes the poetry, right? So we have to say Nishmat before Yehalucha. So we try to be fair, both Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda. But let's carry on in the Gemara. Let's carry on one more little section in the Gemara. We said, Reve'i Gomer Alav Hallel, a fourth, he concludes the Hallel. The Gemara here has a fifth. Hamishi Omer Alav Hallel Hagadol. A fifth. This is the fifth cup. He recites over it the great Hallel. According to Rabbi Tarfon, Divrei Rabbi Tarfon, V'yesh Omrim, this is Rabbi Tarfon who remembers the Beit Mikdash. V'yesh Omrim, and some people say, Hashem ro'i lo echsar, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So we have a choice here. Well, we have a number of choices. We're going to see in a minute that the Rambam says the fifth cup is a matter of choice anyway. But when we pour the fifth cup, we have a choice. We can say over it, Hodu Lashem Kitov. That is actually what is printed in our Haggadot. Hodu Lashem Kitov Kiram Chasor. It's a very, very long Tehillah. It's another retelling, by the way, of the Exodus from Egypt. If you read carefully through Hodu Lashem Kitov, you'll see it's another telling, just like B'tzeit Yisrael and Mitzrayim is a telling. So it's another telling. Hashem ro'i lo echsar. I don't understand why that is. Maybe because we're generally maybe this is a sort of a telling, maybe it's another way of telling, we're protected by God, we're protected from the Egyptians. Maybe, I don't know. I find Hashem lo ro'i, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I find that slightly more difficult to understand in the context of the Haggadah, but in terms of divine protection, yes, maybe it does sense. It does make sense. The Gemara is clearly more interested in the Great Hallel because it says then, Me'heichan Hallel Gadol. Where do we start reading for the Great Hallel? And Rabbi Yehuda says, Me Hodu Lashem Kitov Ad Naharot Bavel. So from give thanks to the Lord until Naharot Bavel is basically the first verse of the next Tehillah. So Rabbi Yehuda will say the whole of the Tehillah, Hodu Lashem Kitov. Rabbi Yochanan will actually start a little bit earlier. Rabbi Yochanan will start from Shir HaMalot, and Rabbi Achabar Yaakov says he sort of goes halfway through. He starts from the middle of Psalm 135, but he'll pick up Hodu Lashem Kitov and then go on to right to the end of Hodu Lashem Kitov. I mean, all three of them agree that we say Hodu Lashem Kitov. It's just a question of where they begin. So we've got this idea of the fifth cup, at least in the Munich manuscript. And remember, we said when we began that for all of each and every four in the Haggadah, there's going to be a hidden fifth. So here's the hidden fifth cup. And the Rosh and the Rif and the Rambam all recognize it, but Rashi disagrees. So if we look at Rashi on our Gemara, the Gemara we've just learned, Chamishi Gomer Alav et Hallel Hagadol, Rashi says, Rivi Hachigar Sinan. Hachigar Sinan means we use this text, i.e., I'm going to correct the text for you. This is the text we need to use. Hachigar Sinan, Rivi Gomer Alav et Hallel ve Omer Alav Hallel Hagadol. On the fourth cup, we complete Hallel and we recite the great Hallel. So Rashi rolls everything into one. And that is pretty much the nusach you'll see in our Haggadot today, that the big Hallel, Hodu Lashem Ki Tov, is sort of all strung together with the ordinary Hallel. So we say them both together over the fourth cup. But that's not what the Gemara is saying, by the way. The Gemara is saying, you say Hallel over the fourth cup, and then you say the great Hallel over the fifth cup. That's what the Gemara is saying. And Tosafot makes this a little bit clearer. Look at Tosafot. Tosafot are essentially Rashi's grandchildren, by the way. So Tosafot will always follow Rashi. So Tosafot say, Revi'i Omer alav Hallel HaGadol. A fourth, he recites over it the great Hallel. Revi'i Garsinan velo Garsinan Chamishi. We use the expression fourth. We don't say fifth. So Tosafot and Rashi are correcting the text, but they're correcting it in slightly different ways. They're all saying fourth. Let's have a look at the Rambam. Let's conclude. We're nearly out. Oh gosh, we're out of time. Let's conclude with the Rambam, because the Rambam is our best and clearest witness, and he has his own version of the Haggadah, by the way, which he prints. But he is going to explain this whole sequence on the basis of the Mishnah and the Gemara. And he says, afterwards, he washes his hands and recites grace after meals over a third cup and drinks it. You'll notice that the Mishnah doesn't say drink it. It just says, well, it doesn't use the word drink. And then he pours out a fourth cup. And he completes the Hallel over it. And he goes according to Rav Yehuda. Then ve'omer alav birkat hashir, he says the blessing of the song, vehi haluch Hashem kol masecha, etc. The Rambam makes things clear for us. He sort of pulls out, he almost as if he's dissecting the Mishnah and the Gemara, and he's telling us what we need to know. Varech borei pri agafen. And we don't eat anything else except water through the entire night. And then, V'yesh lo limzog kos chamishi, and he may mix a fifth cup. Ve'lomar alav Hallel HaGadol, and he can recite over it the great Hallel, that is to say, Hodu Lashem Ki Tov. Ad al Narot Baval, the whole of the chapter. V'kos ze eino chova. This cup is not obligatory. Kamo arba'a kosot, like the other four cups. V'yesh lo ligmor et Hallel b'chol makom sheyirzeh, and he can complete the Hallel wherever he desires. Afal pi she'eino makom su'uda, even though it's not in the place of the meal. So if you feel like getting up from the meal and completing the Hallel on the sofa, then that is absolutely fine with the Rambam. He says you don't have to be sitting at the table to complete the Hallel, but absolutely, he says, if you want to drink a fifth cup, and over the fifth cup to say the great Hallel, and I guess you would probably say the Nirtzach after that. So you would say the fifth cup and the great Hallel after you finished the fourth cup and the regular Hallel. If you want to do that, it would seem to me that according to the Rambam, we can certainly do that. And it's certainly an interesting thing to discuss at the Seder table.